Welcome to Workology, where we decode the hustle, the hierarchy, and how to slay both. I'm Daisy, project manager and HR expert, here to help you level up in every room you walk into.
And I'm Jonathan, entrepreneur and unapologetic champion for self-worth and value-driven success.
From promotions to pivots, we've got the blueprint. This is Workology.
Mastering the workplace one slay at a time.
All right, well, Jonathan, today we are here to talk about a very, I think, important and popular experience that a lot of candidates, if you're interviewing for a new job, if you're networking at an event, a lot of people are going to come across the typical question of, tell me about yourself.
It
So we're
seems
here
like
to
one of
talk
those,
about that today.
yeah, it seems like one of those questions where you don't really think about how difficult it's going to be until you're faced with it. And it's like, well, so it seems
Yeah,
like having something planned is better.
absolutely. I think, it's interesting because during an interview, when you hear this question, sometimes it can be masked in different ways. And so I've actually heard the question, tell me about yourself, masked in a few different ways. So, for example, you can have it be, I have your resume in front of me, but tell me more about yourself. That's one. And you can feel a little bit stuck or jumbled by that, right?
Yes. It's like, okay, well, if you're looking at the resume, what else do you need to know?
Exactly. Another one is take me through your resume. So it's kind of, again, I've got it in front of me, but you tell me the story of you.
Do people really say that? Take me through your resume?
Absolutely. I have been asked
Oh,
this question before.
this is why I would need to do job interviews like in the late afternoon. Because if it was early in the morning, someone's like, take me through your resume. I'm like, well, I printed it out for you.
Yeah, you've
What
got it
part
in
do
front
you
of you.
not, right? What part is unclear? What part do you
Yeah.
not understand?
No, and you know what I think is interesting about the take me about your resume question? It's more like, again, walk me through your story. I want to get to know you via you. What's the TLDR? What's the too long don't read about you?
And you know what
Yeah.
I can appreciate though? At least they have it in front of them. Like you
Yes.
emailed it, you submitted it, right? Uh,
Yeah.
because obviously, if y'all don't know, I work a lot in the commercial acting space, right? And or spokesperson space. I have my email address and my contact information painted everywhere on all of the
Hmm.
documents, everything. And sometimes you get that email that says, like, hey, thanks for submitting. We loved your stuff. Can I get a good email address for you so we can move
Yeah.
to the next step? And early this morning, I got an email like that. And I had to, you know how you type out an
Yeah.
email and then you hit delete and you back it up because
Yeah.
you don't want to send that? I was
Yeah.
like, sure thing. You can use the same one that was submitted in my resume, cover
Yep.
letter, contact information. I'm like, never mind, never mind. Sure, here you go.
Totally. And yeah. And again, this is why the age-old question comes up anyway, right? Because they want to hear through you. There's a few more. Tell me a little bit about your background,
Oh.
describe yourself. Tell me something about yourself that's not on your resume. That one's always a bit tricky.
Ooh. And now, see, I
Yes.
like that one.
Yeah. What do you like about it?
It forces both people to have a conversation as a person outside of as an applicant or
Yeah.
an interview situation, because then you're going to say something that's probably enjoyable to you, like, I enjoy my pets or I like barbecue or whatever, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's it's an interesting one because I think it's also about like what do they want to know about your experience or about you? Because sometimes it's unclear. Do they want to get to know that I like golf? Or do they want to know that I managed this really big project that maybe I omitted from my resume or didn't have the space to include that maybe I can highlight here and could drive a great conversation. So
Ooh.
it's also a bit of a catch-22, but either way, there is a bit of a method and framework that you can follow that will help you successfully answer this question. Do you
I
want to hear?
do love a good method and framework.
So, a couple of different things. According to Indeed, I found this great article. And as we know, Indeed is where a lot of people actually go to submit their resumes and find opportunities. And so, if anyone knows about how to answer this question, I think it's the people at Indeed. But I can also share a bit from my experience in terms of being on both ends. I've been on the side of asking this question and, of course, answering this question. Because just about any time that you're going to interview, that first conversation that you have with a recruiter or a hiring manager throughout your interview process, someone's going to ask it. And so, in terms of how to answer the question, a couple of different things to consider. So, first up is you want to mention experiences and successes as they relate to the job. So, think about the role that you're applying for and try to extract pieces of your past experience that connect to that. And so, for example, if you're going to be applying to be, let's say, what's a good job, Jonathan? What do we want to do for
A
work?
good corporate job? I mean, I don't even know. How about regional sales manager?
Okay, I think you just mentioned Michael Scott. So if you want
I
to
did.
be,
That's the only office in corporate like life and
I love
position I know.
I love it. No, so let's say that we want to be Michael Scott. This is a
I
great
didn't even do that
example.
on purpose.
I love that you did it though, because I feel like our listeners hopefully have watched the show or are familiar with the reference. And so I think a lot of people will know the Michael Scott. And his job as a regional sales manager was to manage people, to manage performance, to sometimes go on sales calls himself. And so with that comes understanding the sales process, understanding how to manage others, having difficult conversations, making sure that your team is efficient and operating well. And of course, I don't know if we remember this famous episode, it's also about leads and generating leads because if we
I
remember, there was a,
remember. I remember
yes,
every episode and almost every line in every episode.
I love this so much. So we're going to have a separate episode where we just talk about the show.
Fair.
But leads are also very important because they are what leads to sales, right? And so for those who are not in sales at all, a lead is someone who expresses interest or has some sort of desire to connect with your product. And as a salesperson, your role is to build the value, connect to the need, and then close the business, which drives revenue. And so, regional sales manager, you're driving revenue and doing all of those other things, right? So if
While
I were to,
managing people.
exactly, while managing a team. And so if I were to be interviewing to be the regional sales manager of Dunder Mifflin or the Michael Scott Paper Company, either
Hmm.
one, either one, deep cut, uh, I would hopefully have some experience related to sales. And so what the things that I would bring up would be connected to that. How did I generate leads? I would speak to if I've ever managed anyone else in the past. I would speak to how I was able to get them to elevate their skills and improve themselves. And so just in that initial, it's like, what are the different moments and experiences that relate to this job that you're going to be applying for?
How long should the answer be?
That's a great question. I think the response should be, I would say, correlated to the amount of experience that you have. What I mean by that is if you've worked for 20 years, you cannot summarize your experience in 30 seconds, but you should also not take 20 minutes to summarize your experience. And so I think that an answer between 2 to 4 minutes, five tops, because now you're possibly going to start losing your recruiter, your audience. You should have like a very tight, put together response that encompasses some of those things.
Okay. So if there were a cutoff, it would be 4 minutes then.
Yeah. I would say definitely no more than four. Three is like the sweet spot.
Oh,
In my
okay.
opinion, this is Daisy's fun facts
Yeah, but
as
you
a former
know.
person who is recruiting and then as someone who's been in the conversation. Because if you think about it, right? If I were to just talk right now for 3 minutes about myself, if you're the recruiter, you're excited because you want to have these like nuggets of information.
Mhm.
And what you're listening for is, okay, does this person's experience and how they're articulating themselves match what it is that I'm looking for? Because the duration of that initial call is only 30 minutes. And so it's a bit of let's get to know you, let's share more about the role, Let's talk a little bit about compensation. And then we're going to close with questions that you have for me. And so that's going to take you through that 30-minute mark. And so you want to give the recruiter time to ask some additional questions, to also have time for you to ask questions, and for there to be a good two-way conversation.
Okay. What's the next point?
Yeah. So I would say consider how your current job relates to the one you're applying for. So we did already talk a little bit about mentioning experiences and successes as they relate to the job, but also considering how your current job relates to what you're applying for. So are there any parallels that you can draw? Uh, the other thing is to also think about strengths and abilities and support those with examples. And so, for example, you want to say that, let's go for the regional sales manager. Your team was performing previously in a quarter at 10%, and in a following quarter, you brought them up to 15%. What were the things that you did between quarter one and quarter two to incrementally drive your team upward by 5 points? What were the things that you did? What were the activities that happened? What did you say to your team? How did you coach them to do that? What were the activities that everyone did in order to grow to that degree? And that's actually a really great example as a regional sales manager because you want to show growth and you want to show ownership of the business.
Now, what if somebody is coming out of school or coming
Yeah.
back to the workplace after years away from it,
Yeah.
and they don't have any uh, current job that relates to the one they're applying for? They don't have any sort of
Yeah.
quarterly growth number things to report. Then what?
Yes. Well, I think the note that I just gave of consider how your current job relates to what you're applying for. Let's make sure that if you are early career or if you're coming back to the professional landscape or any industry for that matter, that what you're doing connects to the skills that you have so that you can speak authentically to that. So maybe if you're early career, you're applying to be the receptionist, or you're applying to be an intern, or you're applying to a role that is more equally matched with your current level of experience. In that case, I would recommend highlighting those different things that would make you a really strong candidate for the role. And so let's say in the example of someone more junior, I just graduated from college. What are the things that I was good at while I was in school? Well, I had to keep a GPA at a certain level. Hopefully, if I've got scholarships to maintain those, or if not, I want to graduate and get my degree, which there's a minimum requirement of expectations there. So if you have a high GPA, that's something I would highlight. It shows that you're hardworking. It shows that you go the extra mile. It shows that you are disciplined. And so those different things are fantastic characteristics that a lot of times people lose sight of, right? Like I think day to day, your boss wants you to show up. Your boss wants you to be energized to do the work that you say you're going to do. And so if you can bring up the characteristics about yourself of, hey, I'm someone who's very disciplined. You can see this in my GPA. I have a 3.5 GPA, 4.0, whatever, your GPA is. You can talk about projects that you led. There are times, and I'm sure we all had it in school, doesn't matter the level, but for sure, high school and above, you're starting to work on group projects. And so a group project is a perfect example where you can say, I led the team, I was the project leader, and this is the way that I organized us, and this was the grade that we got. And these were the things that led us to get that grade. And here's how I contributed to that thing. So I think there's still a lot of really rich experience that you can point to when you're not a professional, but let's face it, I mean, school is your job if you're just graduating. So
Totally.
use it.
And I guess the same would be said for parents. If you've been out of the workforce for a long time,
Yes.
but you've been managing the logistics of a family and kids have to be
Yeah.
here and there and everywhere, that's a skill set.
Yes, parents and caregivers especially have to coordinate so much, right? I think when you look at a household, there are a number of things that need to be, let's say, operationalized from ensuring that bills are managed, that food is in the refrigerator, that laundry is done, that, the home itself is taken care of on the exterior, on the interior. There's a lot of organization and coordination work that happens to do all of those things. And if you're having to manage the personality of a 5-year-old, Guess what? Working professionals sometimes throw their own tantrums, and if you understand how to deal with the emotions of a tiny human in that roller coaster, I am sure that there are a number of examples that you can draw to really elevate yourself and show that you are a master of managing personalities and emotions and doing so in a very thoughtful way.
Absolutely. That's funny. Are there
Yeah.
any more do's before we get into the don'ts? Because I definitely want to hear some don'ts.
Yes. So I would say highlight your personality, right? I think that this is a great opportunity to also just flash in a couple of things about yourself. And I would say be thoughtful about how you do this. So this can slip into the category of the don't, but you can briefly mention hobbies that show any sort of intellectual development or highlight any sort of community engagement, right? So something like and I love to volunteer at the local dog shelter. I love animals. And so I love to do some, like that could be like your personal fun fact that you share because companies tend to also have an arm of corporate social responsibility and will sometimes include volunteer time or have different activities for their employees to engage in together. So flashing in something like that could be good. A recent book you read, a podcast that you're into, things of that nature that again can I would say just elevate and add a little bit of sparkle to the description about who you are so that people can see, oh, okay, this individual is more than just the piece of paper and the resume and the bullet points. They're a full human and a full person that we would like to be around and to work alongside and to have within our company.
So I'm going to ask an interesting question here.
Yeah.
Should your responses be different if your interview is in person than they should be if your interview is on the phone?
Hmm. That's a great question. I think that inherently a phone conversation is always going to feel different than something in person. Because I think relationships are deepened when you're in person. And I would say it's a big reason why even remote first companies have anchored in-person experiences most of the time, even if it's once or twice a year, because there is a value of being in person. There's this different energy and like sense that you get from other people when you're face to face. What I would recommend when you're on the phone is to stand up, to bring energy, have a smile on your face. Like people can sense all of those different things, and your energy shifts when you're taking up greater space. There's Amy Cuddy did a TED Talk talking about the superhero pose and the impact of how what that has on people's ability to perform. And she said that standing in the superhero pose for a certain duration, I think it's like 2 to 5 minutes, something like that, it actually had a positive impact on people who were interviewing or performing a difficult task. They felt more confident and they were able to measure this based on, I think it was like a hormone that's secreted or something like that in those individuals. And so I would say take up space if you're on the phone, spread yourself out if you're at home. Like, try not to hunch over at your desk, like really just give your posture. I'm sure that I even felt like a change in how I sounded when I did that. If you're just listening to this, like hunched over like this versus like being big and broad and like spreading yourself out. I think those things have an effect.
But
So
the answers
definitely.
themselves
Oh
are
yeah,
the
that was your
same.
question. I didn't
I'm just,
answer
but
it.
I'm just saying that. But the response itself is
Yeah.
the same. What you're saying is the same thing whether you're in
Yeah.
person or on the phone. You don't need to adjust anything
Yeah.
for that.
Yes, you don't need to adjust the words that you're saying, but I think the intention and the effort that you're putting behind when you're on the phone or when you're on a virtual call needs to be stronger because I think in person you just
Mhm.
naturally will have the energy from the other person and have a different energy yourself because you're just physically there and grounded differently versus when you're on the phone and they don't see you, or if you're behind a camera and they don't see parts of your world, it's a little bit different. Your expectation of how you hold yourself in space is a little bit different.
I've also found that it's more difficult to quote unquote read the room when you're on the phone. So for me,
Yeah.
I like to make jokes and be funny, whatever. People don't always know that if I'm having a phone interview with them, like to hire an assistant or to hire somebody, they don't always know that I like to be kind of funny. So they'll be
Yeah.
super serious when I might say, tell me why you want the job or tell me what you worked on last. And they're super like almost corporate-y. And
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't have this is relaxed, man. Like you
Yeah.
can, and sometimes I'll drop like profanity or something just to make them comfortable, you know,
Right.
because remember we're dealing
Yeah.
with like actor type people. I'm like you can relax,
Totally.
dude. Like,
Yeah.
but then their real personality comes out. Whereas if we're in the room and they see me and I shake their hand, I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, you know, pull up a chair, relax. Can I get you a cup of coffee or something? Then it's a
Right.
totally different vibe, you know.
Exactly.
So maybe
Yeah.
have a go-to for each situation, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you bring that up because there is a different warmth that you feel when you're in person versus when you're at your desk versus when you're just on the phone. So I again would really highly recommend holding yourself to a bigger, greater standard, like be bigger, be a little bit more flamboyant than you ordinarily would be when you're on the phone or when you're on a Zoom call than how you would be in person, because it will definitely come across stronger, I would say.
And I know we're going to get to the rest of the do's. One of the things that you mentioned that I thought was brilliant was
Yeah.
practicing it and recording yourself
Yes.
practicing it so you can time it out, hear your
Yeah.
responses. I loved that idea.
Yes, I love this. And I think this actually comes to the last recommendation I'm going to have here, which is about formatting your response. So I think that when you're talking about and sharing the tell me about yourself, you can go present, past, and future, or past, present, future of like, this is what I did, this is what I'm currently doing, and this is what I want to do, and this is why I'm here, and what brings me to your role in this conversation today. Or you can go, here's what I'm doing today. This is what I did before. And this is what I'm really excited about in the future. You can kind of format it in those two ways. And you can ask your recruiter if you're not sure how you want to story tell or if you've practiced it a certain way, say it the way that you feel comfortable. But if you're unsure, you can also always ask your recruiter that clarifying question of, how would you like me to respond to this? Do you want to hear a little bit more about what I'm doing today? You want to hear more about my past? You want to hear about the future? And they can just clarify for you. And then you can go from there right into whatever feels right for you.
Good stuff. Anything else
But
on the do
definitely,
list?
I would say again, the definitely practice, practice, practice. What I would say with the practice, though, is don't be overly scripted. What I think sounds terrible, especially in an age where we have Chat GPT, is that, right? People are like, okay, what else are you looking at while you're talking to me? Can you be someone who can improvise, who can rely on your own words, who can be articulate without the help and support of the crutch of ChatGPT or a script that you've prepared for yourself? I think it's great to have notes. I think if we were in person, in the past, I used to carry a pad with me that had little notes for myself, that had my resume there for me, highlighted, and the things that I like, wanted to call out. And I think that preparation is actually very, um, I don't know, admired or revered, or like, I guess people would be impressed by that, right? To
Mhm.
see, wow, this person cared, this candidate prepped before this conversation.
Absolutely.
Um, but I think virtually, you just want to be a little bit cautious of that because people don't want to feel like you need cheat codes in order to present yourself a certain way. And so just practice and know what's the order and what are like the high points that you want to say. But if you don't say something exactly the same way every time, that's okay. And that's actually a good thing. You don't want to sound overly scripted because as a public speaker, or just as a speaker in general, as a communicator, as a great communicator, you want to make sure that you can improv, that you can trust yourself, that you have that confidence in your ability to just speak and to say and to communicate. So I would say practice, but don't over practice.
You can also take full advantage of your setting. If you're on Zoom, most people have a webcam that sits on top of their monitor or it's on their
Yeah,
laptop, at the top of the screen. You can use little sticky notes. I've done this before, and you just write a one-word reminder
I
and you
love
stick
that.
it on that screen. And a webcam's not going to see what's on your like what's literally stuck to your screen.
Yeah,
So as you answer that question, then you
yeah,
can remove some of those sticky notes and now you can
yeah,
see the other person. Another trick that I've used, and it's not a lie, it's the truth, is
yeah,
I'll tell them, hey, just so you know, if you ever see me looking over here, it's because that's where you are. This is my camera. That's you. So I'm looking at you. I'll try to look
yeah,
at the camera as best I can, but when you're talking to me, I'd like to be, at least pretending like we're actually making eye contact.
Yeah.
So sometimes
Yeah.
setting that standard lets them know I'm paying very close attention, even though it might not look like it right now.
Right. And you know what? Interviewers will 9 times out of 10 tell you that they are taking notes. And so if their attention veers to something else or their eye line changes, then it's because they are taking notes. I also think that if you're remote and doing this same interview, that you too can be taking your own notes. I think that it shows that you care and are interested
Awesome.
just as deeply as they are in the conversation because that shows your value. And as a candidate, you want to show that you're not just going to go work anywhere. You also want to interview the company as much as they're interviewing you.
Truth. Okay, give me three major don'ts. And then
Okay.
maybe one story from your own life where somebody just gave the worst tell me about yourself answer you've ever heard and why it was the worst.
Yikes. Okay, great. I love it. Okay, three don'ts. One, don't overtalk. Don't take this answer past the 5 minute mark. If your recruiter called you at 1 p.m. and it is 1:10, they ask you that tell me about yourself question and you're still talking, just shut up and just stop. Please, for the love of God, I'm sure your recruiter would love that too. But don't overtalk. That's number one. I would say number two, and I don't know, I guess I kind of gave this one as well. Like, don't just be overly scripted. I think that if it sounds like you're reading from a script or if you're over practiced, it's going to come across as inauthentic, disingenuous, and they're going to think like, wow, this person as a communicator is probably always going to communicate this way for important things, and that's just not our vibe. And then the last thing that I would recommend is don't be overly casual. I think you mentioned that you like to bring warmth when you're connecting with people in person, and sometimes you might even drop, a word of profanity to
If
like help
I'm
people feel
interviewing
comfortable.
somebody, though.
Yes, exactly, exactly. The reason that I'm bringing you up as an example is for the candidate. Do not allow that to get you overly comfortable because that might be it could be a bit of a double-edged sword. So get comfortable and match and mirror, but don't get overly comfortable and don't overly like I guess whatever direction it is, if you're trying to show, oh, I can be casual, I can also be, personable, etc. Don't get overly casual. Don't get overly chummy with your recruiter. You are not friends. There is an agenda that they have, and there's an agenda that you have. Make sure that you stick to those agendas.
That's very interesting. And the difference between, say, on the corporate side and working for yourself,
Yeah.
for me, when I hire an assistant, I don't want to see the polished performer that practiced something and now they're coming in here giving me their best version of themselves because I'm going to
Hmm.
be working with that person, me personally,
Yeah.
every day on the phone,
Yeah.
in person, on Zoom calls. I want to see who I'm going to be hanging with
Right.
and working with and
Hmm.
will probably become friends with. So I would want to see exactly who that person is, all of their faults, all of
Yeah.
their strengths. So I guess for me, I would want them to be as casual as they would be in the office or in the studio day to
Yeah.
day. With a
Yeah.
recruiter, it's a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, with the recruiter it is a little different because they are the front door. When you come in to someone's front door, you don't kick your feet up. You're the most polished that you are when you're entering someone's home is at the front door.
That is
When you're
such a good analogy.
when you're
I'm
doing that
catching that.
greeting. Yeah, thanks. You walk through the front door, you give the hug, you put your coat up, you take off your shoes, if that's the kind of house you're in. And then you walk over to the couch and you sit down, and then now it becomes a little bit more casual. But
Well
it's
done.
not, yeah. So I would say think about the process that way. And sometimes a hiring manager may naturally have more of that, like I said, like that more, we're at the couch vibe, we're not at the front door vibe. So you can match and mirror that. But even still, I would still suggest, I think that even for your interview style, it would be okay if somebody showed that they were just a little bit more polished than a little too under polished, in my opinion. But
Sure.
you know, and I also
Absolutely.
think industries differ, right? Like I think the way that you go into an audition as an actor and how you show up there has some differences from how you show up for a recruiter call for a corporate job,
I would hope
right?
so.
Yeah. What's interesting is that whenever I show up to auditions, I've only had a few auditions in person. Much of what I have done have been like self-tapes and I just send those in. But whenever I have done in person, there is a piece of me that feels like I'm interviewing, that I'm just like, oh, hello, I'm Daisy. And there's that professional piece of me that still exists underneath that creative that wants to show this character that they're interested in seeing my interpretation of.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a job
Yeah.
interview. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're going to interview for that one day of work most of the
Yeah.
time, or maybe that one week of
Yeah.
work, and then you start all over again. So, what
Yeah.
is a story of somebody who you interviewed
Yeah.
and you said, "Tell me about yourself," and they
Yeah.
bombed?
Yeah. Oof. It's interesting because as you asked this question, I was really trying to think, is there anyone that just glaringly comes to my mind right away? And thankfully, I guess for my sake and for people who have interviewed with me for their sake, it just hasn't been this like big one person that is standing out to me.
Okay, then
But what
what
I
was the
will say,
worst answer that you've ever had?
the answer is the non-answer. The worst answer that I get is the non-answer that does not answer the question at all. I think it's kind of like when you said earlier, you're like, what did you ask me? You said, you asked me a question earlier and I
Oh,
didn't answer.
oh, I said something about, I don't know, but I remember you were like, oh, I didn't answer your question.
Yeah, you asked me a question about one thing, and the way that I responded to it was saying something else that was connected but not directed to what you were asking me.
I think it was
And
if you're like coming into the workforce or something. Was that it?
I
It
can't
doesn't
remember now.
matter.
It's
It
okay.
doesn't
It doesn't
matter.
matter. But the point is, I think if someone asks you a question, man, make sure that you answer it. I think nothing is more frustrating than when somebody begins to ramble off. And it's not even just that they're going long, right? Sometimes it could just be that they are going long. And if it's a captivating story, then maybe you're here for that journey. Again, none of your responses to questions should really be like more than 2 minutes, 3 minutes, if you have very rich examples that you're sharing. I have had candidates and the ones that always frustrate me are the ones where I'll say, tell me about a time when you managed a difficult situation. Nowhere in that response are they sharing about the difficult situation, providing examples of something that was hard that they had to overcome, talking about their role in how to overcome that situation. They're just off into the ether. And I think the worst ones are where you can find you notice that moment where they find themselves off in the middle of nowhere and they catch themselves and they're like, "Wow, I'm so sorry. I feel like I just started rambling. What was the question again?" And I think at that point, 5 minutes into their response to that question, and you're very politely not interrupting them, you're like, I don't think I'm going to move this person forward.
Do you tell them that right away? That's my last question.
No.
And then I know you have a video that you want to share with us. So you don't say, you know what, this isn't going to work. You don't ever do that?
No, I've never done that. What I have done, what I think has been the best thing that I've done is end all interviews in the same way, which is thank you so much for your time. We're interviewing a number of candidates. We'll get back to you by the end of the week on your status in the process and leave it at that. Whether you love them or whether you hated them and never want to hear from them again, I think that's the best way to do it because you don't want candidates to feel when they conclude that call that they're already out of it. I
Got
think
it.
that there is
Okay.
something too about the candidate experience, and you want them to have a good taste in their mouth about your company. You never know if that person 5 years from now is going to work really hard in their career and get better at what they're doing. And maybe we'll come back and interview again and contribute really great value to your company. You don't know that. Or you don't know if they know people in their network that would be awesome for your company. And if they have a really bad experience interviewing with you, they're going to go tell everyone about it. They will, because people love spilling the tea and sharing their negative experiences as opposed to the positive ones.
That's very true. Let's
Yeah.
recap here. So, the
Yeah.
do's of tell me about yourself, that dreaded
Yes.
question.
Yes.
First of all, you want to talk about your experiences and your successes as it relates to that particular position,
Yes.
how your current job or previous job relates to the one you're applying for,
Yes.
and find ways to highlight your personality.
Yeah.
Make sure that
Exactly.
you practice it, rehearse it with
Yes.
bullet points so that you
Yes.
don't sound overly scripted, so
Yes.
that you don't overtalk, and so that you're not allowing yourself to be overly casual.
Yeah. That's it. You got it.
And make sure you answer their question within, say, 2 to 5 minutes, 5 minutes being the you shouldn't have gone that long, you did, it's okay, but stop.
Yeah. Cut yourself off, please.
3 minutes
Wrap it up.
is ideal.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you got it.
I see. And I even took notes. And are we
I
going to
love that.
put the link to this Indeed article in the show notes?
We absolutely will. So check out the show notes. We have
Ta-da.
the Indeed career guide, and there's a really fun video at the bottom of that for how to introduce yourself in interviews, top questions and answers. But before we leave you, I think we have a video,
Mhm.
Jonathan, from Simon Sinek, who is also another really great leader in the professional realm. And this video is a little bit more about a better way to hire. So it's for both sides. If you're interviewing or if you're the interviewer, I think it's great to just check this video out. We're going to play it for you. Jonathan, anything else to add? Any other closing thoughts?
This comes from Simon Sinek's YouTube channel. We'll link to the video in the show notes. And I guess one thing that I would add when I've interviewed people, I want them to do a little bit of research and
Yes.
know who they're going to be interviewed by. One of the things I
Yes.
don't necessarily like when I've interviewed assistants or instructors is when they say, well, tell me about what you guys do here. Um, I'm normally like, well, didn't you, you know, do some research on that? Um,
Yes.
so I would say that's a really big plus. I also like it when people say, when should I hear from you
Yeah.
regarding the job? I like to
Yeah.
tell people, I'll let you know yes or no. If I forget, please feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah.
Um, but that's something that it's not really about the tell me about yourself. But when people
Yeah.
say those things or do those things, I then have this mental picture of them later that they did their research, they
Hmm.
value their time and mine, and they're not letting somebody just, leave them up in the air.
I
And
love
I
that.
value that.
I love that. That's such a great call out for those two. So do your research and follow up early, like even at the end of the interview, ensure that you have a next step lined up.
You ready for the Simon Sinek A Better Way to Hire video?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. And this is where we'll leave people. So thanks for being here. This is episode 1. Episode 2 is coming.
Yeah.
And
Workology.
there you go. Workology, the mastering the workplace one slate at a time.
Love
See,
it.
see you next time where Daisy gives you the corporate perspective and I give you the entrepreneurial make your own way perspective. Hopefully you
Yes.
can meet in the middle and find success. Here is Simon Sinek, A Better Way to Hire.
So yeah, I mean, let's reinforce that point because I think it's an important one that fulfillment is a right and not a privilege. And when we go out with our friends for dinner, or when we used to be able to do that, you sit around and somebody says, "I love my job," and everybody goes, "Oh my God, you're so lucky," like they won something. That statement should be the norm, not the exception. We should all get to go to dinner and say, "I love my job," and it's the one person who says, "I don't," that we can intervene. So yeah, I believe it is a right, and we have a responsibility ourselves to find a place where we want to work with the people that we would work with, rather than just taking the biggest salary. That we have a responsibility to take care of the people around us, and we have a responsibility to speak up and ask our leaders to work with us and create a place where people want to come to work, where there's a safe space for us to take care of each other and feel taken care of. So there's mutual responsibility all around. So when you say, how do we do it? Well, it requires constant work. It's like, how do you stay healthy? Well, I can give you a whole list of things you have to do. You have to eat right. You have to nurse your personal relationships. You have to get enough sleep. You have to exercise. You have to meditate. You have to be mindful. There's like 30 things. And you can't do all those things well all the time. It's a striving. And when one's doing well, sometimes one thing falls off. It's a striving, and it's the same. The pursuit of fulfillment is a striving. I think it's, this is why I make the distinction between fulfillment and happiness. To seek happiness is a lot easier because happiness is fleeting. You get a new job, you're happy. You get a raise, you're happy. You win a new piece of business, you're happy. You're given a gift, you're happy. Somebody says something nice to you, you're happy. And that feeling goes away. Nobody walks around with a sense of happiness for a job they got 4 years ago. It's gone. Where fulfillment is different. Fulfillment, you can feel fulfilled by your work even if you're not enjoying it today. You can feel fulfilled by your work even if you're having a bad day, or one of your colleagues is grumpy. You can still be fulfilled by the work. It's more infinite. It's more constant. And so, whereas happiness is, the things that lead up to it sounds more like an event. Fulfillment is a striving. It's a lifestyle. And you do all these things, like having a just cause, like building trusting teams, and working to be the leader you wish you had. In other words, you see your life as a life of service to those around you, whether you're in a company, whether you're an employee, whether you're a leader, or if you're just a parent, that you see your life in service, to your spouse, your partner, or your kids, and indeed your community. What makes a community highly functional is that we view that every single person within that community sees their responsibility to serve the community rather than standing around demanding the community does something for them. It's a chicken and egg question. You can pursue these things and you can trust your gut without ever learning it. People who trust their guts, we all kind of know, we just don't have the words for it. And understanding your why gives you words. Understanding your why makes it a lot easier. I have a little metaphor called the celery test that really captures it nicely. So we're constantly seeking advice on whatever it is, how to build a better family, be a better parent, build a better business, serve our community better, whatever it is. We're constantly seeking advice, and we read books and we read articles and we ask friends and we talk about it, and so the question is which advice do you follow? It's hard. And so the analogy is it's like you go for dinner at somebody's house, and it's a dinner party or something, and everybody's got some advice about what you should do. If you want to build a great community, you need to use M&Ms. We used M&Ms, and it worked great for us. You want to build a great community, somebody else says, rice milk. Especially in these difficult times, you have to use rice milk. Kit Kats, somebody else says. We use Kit Kats, and it's been amazing. And somebody else says, no, celery. Celery is the thing you have to use. And so you go to the supermarket, and the question is, which products do you buy, right? You don't know. And so you may buy them all. So it takes time and it takes money to go through the supermarket and buy all those products. And the problem is you may or may not get value out of some of those things. You don't really know. And when you're standing in the line with all of these products in your shopping basket, nobody can see what you believe because you bought everything. If you know your why, right? Let's say your why is to always be healthy and only do things that protect the health of your body. You get all the same advice from all the same wonderful people that all have wonderful case studies. And the question is, which advice do you follow? Which products do you buy? It's super easy. We don't even have to talk about it. Everybody listening instantly knows you only buy rice, milk, and celery. Obviously. You spend less time at the supermarket. You spend less money at the supermarket. You're guaranteed to get value from those products. And when you're standing in line with only celery and only rice milk in your basket, Everyone can see what you believe. Somebody can come up to you and say, hey, I can see that you believe in being healthy. So do I. Congratulations, you just attracted a new member of the community, somebody who will be, who fits the value set. And as you can see, you can make gut decisions about what feels right and what doesn't feel right, but by putting it into terms, when you know your why, not only do you have better clarity, more confidence when you make your decision, but you also have the opportunity to scale it a lot easier. Because by telling everybody what you believe, now they can go shopping for you and you don't even have to be there.